Rabotai, welcome back to another great Evean HaEzer Halacha series. We are continuing in Siman Aleph and Halacha Gimel, part 2 of the Shi'ur. Before we do start, I want to make a small correction that one Talmud Chacham that I learned with, he pointed this out to me after listening to my lecture yesterday for part 1. He said, Rabbi, you compared Znut in this case to sleeping with a married woman, meaning adultery. Says it's not, you can't say that it's adultery, it's promiscuity, but you can't really say it's adultery because by doing adultery, they get killed. Over here, we're not going to tell you Chas v'Shalom that they're going to get killed. So he's right. I'll take that back. I did compare yesterday that if a boy who's under 13 years of age, and he gets married, since his ketubah doesn't mean anything, we said that every time that he has the biyah, he has relations with his wife, quote unquote, we said that biyah is biyah znut. So we're not going to say that it's as if he's sleeping with a married woman because it does sound very harsh, but we're going to say that he's doing promiscuity. That's all we're going to say. So I want to thank that Talmud Chacham who came up to me and showed me my mistake. Thank you. We are continuing back in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Ubishum inyan, in no way, lo ya'avor misrim shana below isha." In no way should 20 years pass on a person without being with a wife. Rabotai, did you hear what the Shulchan Aruch just said? Ubishum inyan, in no way, no how, lo ya'avor misrim shana below isha. It shouldn't pass over a person 20 years that he's not with a wife. Meaning to say that by the age of 20, he already has to be married. What happens if the 20 years went by him and he still didn't get married? Listen to the words. And he doesn't want to get married. Bedin kofin oto lisa kedei lekayim mitzvah priya u'rivia. Bedin, the court, the Jewish court, have the ability to force him to marry in order for him to do the mitzvah of pru'urvu, to being fruitful and multiplying. Rabotai, there is a Torah. The Torah says something very scary. When a boy who's at 20 years old and he still didn't get married, there's a very big problem with that. Why? Is Hashem really happy with him? Look what the Torah says. V'kevan she'avru 20 shana v'lo nasa, since 20 years have passed and he didn't get married, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu tefach atzumotav. Hashem says, let his bones swell up, meaning let him basically blow up. I don't know if it's such a good thing. I don't know if it's such a blessing. But we do see in the Torah that Hashem is not very happy with people when they don't get married at the age of 20. Comes the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, we want to learn it that specifically if he doesn't want to get married. If it's trying, it's one thing. But if he's sitting back and not saying, you have sometimes a person, you give him shidduchim. I don't want. Why don't you want? I don't want. I'm not ready now. Why is not ready? I'm just not ready. Give me a reason. So Rabotai, there's a difference between going on a date and it's not working out for you. Maybe she's not attractive in your eyes. Maybe she's too short. Maybe she's too chubby. Maybe she's too skinny. Okay, fine, but to tell me that just because you don't want to get married, or because you want to have a good time, or because you want to finish, I don't know what you want to do, build an empire. I don't know what you want to do, Rabotai. That's what he says over here. That if somebody if 20 years went by someone and he still didn't find a wife, and he didn't want to get married, Bedin has to force him to get married in order to be able to bring children to the world, to do the mitzvah of pru or vu by being fruitful and multiplying. And we saw in the Torah, he says already that if that did happen, right? How was the language? I got it. Just the language, Rabotai. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hashem himself says, Tepchach atzemotav, that his bones should swell up, or they should explode, or they should basically, I don't know how you want to understand this piece. But it's not such a good blessing. Continues the Shulchan Aruch and he says, Umihu, however, he makes an exception to when is a person exempt from getting married. Umihu, however, im osek b'Torah, if he's toiling in Torah, v'tarut ba, and he's occupied with it. his whole life, Rabotai. We'll see that in Halacha Daled. Umityareh lisa isha, and he's afraid to marry a woman. Why? Because he doesn't want to occupy himself with sustaining her. Once you get married, you have to start working. Work takes away from learning. That he doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to be occupied with that. Because if he's going to be occupied with work, he's not going to be able to learn Torah. Mutar lit-acher. He's allowed to go ahead and he's allowed to postpone getting married. Rabotai, if we look into Ot Vav in the Ber Heitev, where it says lit-acher, where it says that you're allowed to postpone not getting married if a person is toiling in Torah and is occupied with it, that's his whole life, Rabotai, and he's afraid by getting married to a woman is going to take him away because now he has to go to work. We said he's allowed to postpone. So comes the Ber Heitev and Ot Vav and he brings in the name of the Beis Shmuel. So how much? 10 years you could postpone. 20 years? 40 years? How long can you postpone? So the Ber Heitev says, Ve'en kitzba l'dawar. There's no set amount of time. Afilu kol yamav, even all his days of his life, his whole life, if he's going to postpone it, only because he wants to learn Torah, go ahead, postpone it. Don't ever get married. That's what the Ber Heitev is saying. If this person has a cheshek, he has a desire to learn Torah, and that's his life, Rabotai, he's allowed to postpone. Up to how much can he postpone? Forever, basically. He never has to get married. But when do we tell you that rule that he's allowed to postpone and he doesn't have to be afraid of getting married? That specifically, that's specifically if his Yetzer Hara doesn't overpower him. But if his Yetzer Hara overpowers him, then Rabotai, this halacha doesn't apply. Then he's allowed to postpone. He has to get married because the Yetzer Hara overpowers him. So the Talmid Chacham that I learned with, he says something nice. He says when you learn this halacha and you see Chacham Avadia or you see other Gedolim, they got all married. Can you really say today, that's what he was telling me, he said, can you really say today that you have somebody that's going to be really potter? If Chacham Avadia, that his whole life was Torah, got married and had children and everything, how are we going to be exempt? Okay. That was his ha'ara, that was his footnote. So that's what we see from the Beis Shmuel, which the Ber Heitev brings down. If a person wants to go ahead and postpone because he's occupied with Torah and he's afraid that if he's going to have to get married, it's going to take him away from learning Torah because now he has to financially support his wife. Up to when? He says there's no time. It's unlimited. It could even be his whole life. He doesn't have to get married. But that's as long as the Yetzer Hara doesn't overpower him. But the second the Yetzer Hara overpowers him, this heter, this permission does not apply. He has to get married immediately. And if you want to tell me today, Rabotai, what's going on in the world with how the women are dressed, you want to tell me people are tzaddikim, and they're closed with their eyes, all day walking. Rabotai, the Yetzer Hara is outside. It's outside. So here, I one time saw in a book, I forgot the name of the book, it's not my Peshat. I don't want to take credit. I forget, I'm not going to remember now, it's probably a year ago, if not more. They said over there that, did you ever realize that when you're walking on the street, you're just walking, and something tells you to turn left or right or look to the back or look, why you have to look? You're just walking. He said because when a woman dresses immodest, she has a lot of bad angels that go with her. So what do? They start going and they start telling, they come to your mind, say, look there, where the girl is, where she's immodest. So when you look, who do you see? You see her. Because they're the ones that are signaling to you. It's basically a Wi-Fi service. When a girl is not tznius, automatically you attract this like Wi-Fi, bam, connection to her, and you look and you see it's her. And then you say, why did I look back? Rabotai, it's a problem. So in this type of world, you want to tell me a person is going to be able to overcome his Yetzer Hara? Okay, Rabotai, ask your local rabbis what to do. Now, comes the Ramah says, Ubisman hazeh, Rabotai, if you would have done the tour in this, the Ramah in Darkei Moshe, it's nuts. He says there was not one rabbi. He said there was not one rabbi that actually did such a thing to protest against, to force a boy to get married. Nothing, because he's going to also say regarding couples, If can you force a couple to get divorced if they don't have children for 10 years? Or if a person wants to get married to a woman who can't have children, but he still didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Puru. So basically, Rabotai, the Ramah is going to tell us over here, when it comes to marriages, when it comes to zivugim, couples, all these things, we don't force them, Rabotai. It's not something, not a field that we can get in. But let's see what he says. Ubizman hazeh nowadays, nahagu, the custom is, shelo lechof. The custom is that we're not going to force the boy who's 20 years old and doesn't want to get married. We're not going to force him to get married. So he argues on the Shulchan Aruch. Shelo lechov hazeh. We're not going to force him on this. V'chein, and so too, where else we're not going to force people? Mi shelo kiyem pri'ah urvi'ah. If somebody did not fulfill the mitzvah of pru'urvu, meaning being fruitful and multiplying, ubal isa isha she'ena bat banim. He wants to marry a woman that's not childbearing. She can't have children. Kigon, for example, akara, a barren woman, lo leinu. Vezekina, excuse me. Vezekina, or an elderly woman that can't have children. Okatano, he wants to marry a younger girl. Mishum shechoshik ba. Why does he want to marry all these women? The akara, the zekina, or the ketana? Or because he has a desire for her? Or mishum mamon shalom. Maybe she has a lot of money. I don't know why he's getting married to her. So he says either he desires her, or either because she has a lot of money, so he thinks that the will is going to go to him. That's why he wants to marry her. But the problem is, Rabotai, he doesn't have children. So how are you marrying a katana that cannot bring children? How are you marrying a zekina, an elderly woman that cannot have children? How are you marrying an akara, a barren woman that also cannot have children? Because you're not allowed to marry them because they're not childbearing. If they're not childbearing and you have a mitzvah of Puru, why are you jumping in the wrong ocean? So he says over here, the Ramah says, Afapi, even though Shemidina Hayalim Chulbo, even though halachically speaking, you have to protest against him that he shouldn't get married. Lo nahagu mikama dorot ledagdeg be'inyan azivugim. He says in many generations they were not particular in regards to couples. They leave it alone, Rabotai, leave it alone. Va'afilu benasa isha, even if a person went ahead and he married a woman, v'shaha ima 10 shanim, and he was with her 10 years, lo nahagu lechov oto. We're not accustomed to force him to divorce her. He says right over here, Lo nahagu lechov ota ligirasha. We don't have the custom to go ahead and force him to divorce her. Even though he did not fulfill the mitzvah of Pru Urvu. Also when it comes to other couple situations, we don't force the husband to divorce. As long as his wife is not asur on him. If the wife is asur on him, then we're going to force him to divorce. For example, a Kohen marries a divorcee, he can't stay with her. A Jew marries a mamzeret, he can't stay with her. A Jew wants to be with a Goya, he can't stay with her. Any relationship that there is a forbidden, there's a Isser done, there's a prohibition between them two, we're going to tell you, this halacha, this custom of the Ramah does not apply. You have to force him to divorce her. Rabotai, if we look into Ot Zayin in the Behetiv, where the Ramah says that the custom is nowadays that if you had a person that waited with his wife 10 years and he was not able to have children with her, and he didn't do the mitzvah of Pru Urvu, the Ramah said the custom is we don't force him to divorce her. So the Behetiv in Ot Zayin says, Ein Cham. Look into Chelkag Mechokok. Rabotai, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but over there the Cham says clearly, you do protest. He says you do protest. You have to protest against the husband that he should leave his wife and go do the mitzvah of Pru. And the other case also, that if a guy wants to marry an akara, v'zekena, or ketana, we're going to tell him, we're forcing him not to marry her. We have to prevent him from marrying a woman who's not childbearing and force him to marry a woman that is childbearing. Because remember, he has to still do the mitzvah of Pru Urvu. Now, Rabotai, listen to this. V'im rotzeh ligarisha. What happens if the husband... Okay, we're not forcing him. That's out of the question. The minhag is we don't force. Fine. Excuse me. But what happens if he wants to divorce her? Bisman has it. Nowadays he wants to divorce her. Be'al kurcha, against her will. After he already was with her 10 years and they were not able to have children. Comes the Behetiv and he says, in the name of the Beit Shemul, Nir'eh, it seems, B'kahigavna lo gazar Rabbeinu Gershon bash. He says, in such a situation, the decree of Rabbeinu Gershon does not apply. What was the decree of Rabbeinu Gershon? Rabbeinu Gershon said that you not, again, this does not apply for Sephardim, this is Ashkenazim. Rabbeinu Gershon said that you're not allowed to forcefully, against your wife's will, divorce her. Let me repeat it one more time. Let me say it clear. Rabbeinu Gershon held that if a guy wants to divorce his wife, it has to be with her consent. He cannot do it against her will forcefully. I'll give you an example. By Sephardim, the wife says, I don't want to get divorced, I don't want to get divorced, I love you so much, I love you so much, I don't want to get divorced. Fine. What are we going to do? Against her will, we're going to take a get, we're going to throw it in her 4 amot space, she's divorced. Rabbeinu Gershon said that by Ashkenazim cannot be done against her will. You could throw it, you could do whatever you want. If she did not agree to the divorce, she's not divorced. So that's what he's telling you over here like this. That what happens if this guy, after 10 years, being with a woman that's not able to bring him children, he wants to divorce her today. But he's doing it against her will, without her consent. She doesn't want to divorce him. But he wants to do the mitzvah puruvum. So he says here, it seems in such a situation, the decree of Rabbeinu Gershon doesn't apply here. Meaning to say, he's able to go ahead and divorce her after 10 years against her will. The only reason being is because they don't have children. And we can say that Rabbeinu Gershon's case was in a normal situation, not in a case where they were married for 10 years without children. Okay. And then he says, Ayin Siman Kuf Nudala, look into Siman 154. Beautiful. Rabotai, we continue now to the Pitchet Teshuvah. The Pitchet Teshuvah says like this. When we said in the Ramah that the minhag is not to force, not the 20-year-old boy, and not to deal with couples, like we explained. The Pitchet Teshuvah says, Katav Birkei Yosef, the Birkei Yosef wrote, Dechen Katav Maharshal, so to the Maharshal wrote, excuse me, Beyam Shel Shlomo, in the Sefer called Yam Shel Shlomo, excuse me, Perik Habal Yivamto, Siman Mem, he wrote over there also, like the Ramah, the Birkei Yosef says that the Maharshal B'Yam Shel Shlomo also says that the minhag is not to force the boy or to force the guy to get divorced or not to get married. We don't get involved in these things. Put it to you like that. Aval, however, Rabbi Yisai, B'Sefer Kriyat Melech Rav, B'Be'uro Perik Tetvav, the Ishut Katav. In the Sefer Kriyat Melech Rav, in his explanations on chapter 15 of marriage, he wrote, the whole bedin, any Jewish court, she'enu kofeh al zeh, who does not force the 20-year-old boy to get married, or force the husband, this guy who wants to get married, to a kara, zekena, or ketana, if you're not going to force them, lav shapir avid, he says they're not doing good. Rabotai, a bedin which does not force, like the Shulchan Aruch, comes the Sefer Kriyat Melech Rav, and he tells you what they're doing is not good. So again, Rabotai, when I'm reading over here, I have to try to put everything inside for you guys so you can have it clearly. So basically what the Sefer Kriyat Melech Rav is telling you is that Bedin has to go ahead and force the boy who's 20 years old and not married, because he doesn't want to get married. We have to force him. That's point number one. Point number two, if you have a person that wants to get married to a barren woman or to an elderly woman, because all of them are not childbearing, or to a girl underage, she's also not childbearing. He says over here, you have to force him not to get married to her. Not like the Ramah. The Ramah says you don't force. Or what happens if you have a case, a guy who stayed with his wife 10 years and they were not able to have children. We force him to divorce her. The bottom line is the Sever Kriyat Melech Rav is saying that any bedin that does not use force to do what's right, let's put it like that, they're not doing what's right. Ve'en lashgir b'minhag, he says, do not pay attention to the custom of what the Ramah said, because we have a halacha. The halacha says you have to force, you force. Not like the Ramah said in minhag. After he said don't pay attention to the minhag. V'katav od b'maharikash. Furthermore, it's written in the maharikash. Digdek losha mechaber. He was particular in the words of the mechaber. Why? What did the mechaber say? Ve'enu rotzeh lisah chulu. Right? What did the mechaber say? He said that when are we going to force the boy who's 20 years old and doesn't want to get married? That specifically if he doesn't want to get married, then we force him. So from the language einu rotzeh lisah, that he doesn't want to get married, from that language comes the marikash, and he says, the mashma, it's implied from the Shulchan Aruch, she'im rotzeh, what happens if he really wants to? Be'emet he wants to. Ela she'mitakev ad she'imtzeh zivug na'ah. Rather, he's just holding back only because he wants to find the right girl. He wants 5'8", slim, beautiful, working, college, I don't know, this, bum, a good family, I don't know. He has preferences. He has a whole shopping list what kind of girl he wants. Or l'siba cheret, or for any other reason. Financially, he's not stable, maybe. And I don't know, maybe healthy, I don't know, Lolino. So, there's reasons he wants to, but there's reasons or things that are holding him back. Lo kaifinan le. The Maharikash wants to say you're this type of person. When he reaches 20 years old, you're not allowed to. He says it's implied from the Shulchan Aruch, this type of people, you're not allowed to force. Nevertheless, comes the Maharikash and he says something very important. He says, nevertheless, it seems, he says, still it seems to be, even though I'm telling you now, that you can go ahead and prolong, right? You can go ahead, if it doesn't fit your criteria, we can force you. We cannot force you, because that's the way it's implied from the Shulchan Aruch. But he says, nevertheless, it seems, because he's not 100% sure, he says, but nevertheless, the guy should not postpone it so much, when things which are out of his control, he should only postpone it maximum up to 24 years. That's it. What the Maharikash is saying is like this. When we're going to tell you this whole leniency of his understanding from the Shulchan Aruch, where he says, where he doesn't want to get married, but if he wants to get married, it's just he wants this type of girl, he wants this type of family, he wants her to be height, he wants her to be tall, he wants her to be slim, whatever it might be. Fine. The Maharikash says, okay, fine, we won't be able to force you. But all these excuses you have only up to 24. Once 24 comes, since it's not really dependent on you, it's outside of you. Why are you being so picky? You want the next top model. Okay, so now at the age of 24, the Maharikash is telling you, you're going to have to settle for the 10th place model. What can I tell you? You want a skinny girl. Okay, the Maharikash is telling you, fine. From 20 to 24, you have a preference. We can hold that off. We're not going to force you. But at 24, if you don't find that skinny girl, you got to find something a little bit bigger. I want a beautiful girl. Okay? You have that preference from 20 to 24. But once 24 hits, you have to almost, I don't want to say you have to settle for anything less, but you have to start settling for something, you understand? You have to start settling. Because when you hit 24, it just gets only harder. So there, Rabotai, we did finish the halacha with this Peit Chiddushah, but we do see that how Hashem is not really happy with boys that don't get married at the age of 20, and that's specifically when they don't want to get married. But if they do want to get married, Rabotai, like we saw from the Maharikash, they have up to 24 years of age to make that decision. Again, everybody has to make right decision, right calculations. The best way to always go about the situation is always speak to a rabbi that knows you well. Rabotai, have a blessed day. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.